Hi. We are here today to talk about RevOps versus the economic downturn. And I have a panel full of stars, and I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. But while we give people some time to join us, let me do a quick icebreaker with my panelists. And I want to ask them, what's the best day you had recently? And I'm going to start with Danielle.
Hey, so I'm very happy to say I've had some great days this summer. I think one of the best days I've had recently was actually kind of more of a big adult day this past weekend, actually. But my partner and I bought a house and we picked
Oh,
out all the appliances and did cabinet picking and quartz for the countertop. So
that's pretty
it
fun.
just it was nice that it actually went much smoother. It's one of those days you think you're gonna dread, but went really smooth. Had a really nice celebratory dinner afterwards. So
That's pretty fun. One of my favorite things to do is moving. I love moving apartments and just picking out new furniture, and I just love it. So I'm pretty sure it was a happy day. What about you, Jeff? What was a recent happy day or good day that you have?
Well, I'm recovering from COVID, so if you hear any nasal congestion, I'm still going through it. Best day was probably the day the fever broke, so I'll say I was able to get up and walk around the house.
Oh, I'm sorry for you. Hope you're feeling better now. What
Thanks.
about you, Tasha?
So I would say recently, so one of the things that happened recently, my daughter came and she got into law school, a good one, and we felt great about that. And it was a good day because I got to see her. She's living out her dreams. So that made me feel great as her mom.
That's pretty major. That's a very, very big day. What about you, Ushan? And congratulations to your daughter. Sorry. What about you, Ushan?
I recently became an uncle, and because of the whole COVID travel restrictions, I had not been able to meet that family
Oh.
member for so long. Finally, that was possible over the last weekend. I think that's the one that comes to mind right now, being able to reunite with some of those folks that you've not met for about, like, I think, a multitude of 3 years at this point.
That's pretty good. That's a very nice day. Yeah. Um, I am from Brazil and I live here in New York and I wasn't able to see my family for 2 years. So I pretty much feel you when you can reunite with your family. It's a pretty good feeling. All right, let's get started. Today we're here to talk about recession-proof RevOps with these awesome panelists, and we're excited about the amazing content and takeaways you will get from this event. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum and a quarterly summits. And we are starting to get back into in-person events, which is pretty exciting. If you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. And if you like this content, and I'm sure you will love our Revenue Excellence Summit happening October 11th through the 13th. We put together 24 events of amazing content and speakers, and I'm gonna drop a link in the chat right now so you can all register for our amazing event. But before we jump in and start having fun, let me give you quick housekeeping notes. Um, First, this panel is being recorded and you will be able to access the recording in the MSP website and it will also be in your follow-up email, sorry. And also, please, I was talking with the speakers in the backstage. They love answering questions. So please use the Q&A function and send them a lot of questions so we can get them happy to go through the day. And also, talking about an economic downturn makes us like a little bit down. So let's make them happy and send them a lot of questions. But enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without our sponsor. And today's sponsor is Everstage. We have Bhushan here. He's the Director of Growth at Everstage. Bhushan, if you can introduce Everstage to us and then give us a little quick introduction about yourself, telling us your name, your title, and where you're based.
Thanks, Eduardo. So, folks, Everstate's the modern sales compensation management platform. Our customers today love us, and that's rated by our G2 rating. We've moved to the leader quadrant in the shortest span possible of the competitors out there. And our customers primarily use us for bringing transparency to their incentive process, gamification for their incentive-based teams, and making sure they're able to have a seamless experience with respect to quick changes on compensation, and making sure that their sales team are happy and informed with how their payouts are going to look like.
That is amazing. We are so glad to have Everstage as a sponsor. And Bhushan, since you're already with the mic, can you give us a quick introduction about yourself? Tell us your title and where you're based.
Yeah, so I'm based out of India. I today manage the growth aspects at Everstage. I look specifically after customer onboarding, solutions, and customer success as well. So pretty much everything from a customer acquisition perspective and beyond. Yeah.
It keeps you busy, right? It's a lot of things to do. Let's hear from Danielle. Danielle, give us a quick introduction.
Hello, everyone. Danielle Marquis. I'm over in Boston. I'm our VP of RevOps at Zappy. Zappy is a consumer insights platform, and we're really focused on data for creators. So I've been in the RevOps space for over 13 years now. The whole evolution from sales ops to RevOps to what I've been hearing more and more and would like to see pick up some more is go-to-market ops. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We also have Tasha joining us today. Tasha, can you give us a quick introduction?
Sure. I am Tisha Cable. I'm in Vallejo, California. So my company is called C Model. I'm the CEO of that company. It's a decision intelligence company that helps CEOs to find the truth in their data, specifically focused on their growth decision models. So we help them to plan using our proven methodology, and then of course sharing that decision-ready analysis with their stakeholders. In my experience, I've been, before this role, I was the VP of Business Operations at a scale-up, and then VP of Business Development and Product Strategy. Those were the roles I held before this one.
Awesome, thank you very much. It sounds like you keep yourself busy too. And last but not least, let's hear from Jeff. Jeff, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So my name is Jeff Ignacio. I'm the head of sales and marketing operations at a startup called Forethought.ai. We work on human-powered, human-centered AI for the customer service departments. I've been in the RevOps space, and much like Danielle, go-to-market ops is a more appropriate term for what we do. I've been in the space for over 12 years as well. So happy to be here. I'm also an advisor for Everstage.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining. So we are ready to start with the questions, start with the fun. And so today's topic is about the economic downturn and RevOps. So we keep on seeing news about the recession, reports coming out daily, and data about how impending slowdown and how the business will be affected. Many people are being let go, and on the other hand, a lot of people are hiring. And this creates a lot of uncertainty. So it's safe to assume that the economic is on a roller coaster right now, ups and downs. And RevOps is the key to enabling efficient growth and in a down market like it is right now. So let's start from the beginning and let's ask my panel, how can RevOps start dealing with this economic downturn? Where do we start to change gears and prioritize? And let me ask Danielle first.
Yeah, so chatting a little bit before, but my big theme, I like to work on themes and keep a little bit of focus, is really been back to basics over the last couple months. Getting into a recession, and I'd say we're actually, we're a couple quarters into that recession, right, is not the time to absolutely overcomplicate a selling or a buying journey. You have to remember, not only is there flux going on at your own businesses, but your customers and your buyers are also going through the same economic environment. So not just how can you, kind of take it back to basics with, okay, looking at pipeline management at a more baseline level versus trying to really overcomplicate a forecasting model, which quite frankly is not going to work as well off of trending in the middle of a recession, because your historical trending around that's not going to be as accurate going into that. So getting reps and managers and leadership team really focus around some of that basics, and even looking at it more frequently than you might have. If you had a monthly cadence, go to a bi-weekly cadence. But yeah, getting back to basics on your sales process basics and whatnot is definitely a big thing. And then I think the other big area of RevOps is helpful to focus on is helping to change the narrative from that panic-led to data-backed decisions. So something our team has been working really hard on is looking at new business trends from last year to this year, how much of it is tied into the economic environment right now versus other areas we've seen of leading indicators that might have shifted. So really trying to get smart about why we think something is going good or bad, which quite frankly is a big component of RevOps anyways, but even more so when you're going through a recession. And we're in a great position, and we have a lot more, I'd say, relevance around the company and leadership team these days, to be able to help, again, control that narrative from panic to data backed and help make a little less emotional back decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Going back to basics is always like grounding, right? You always feel yourself calm to deal with whatever is being thrown your way. Jeff, can you answer the question for me, please?
Yeah, I would definitely say if you haven't changed gears already, you might be a little bit late, right? Just you don't want to wait until a recession is announced, because an announcement of a recession is actually a lagging indicator. But there are a couple things I think that would be useful, right? If you think about the last 3 years as operators, we've had to jump twice, right? With COVID and shutdowns, we had to adjust there, and we have to do it again. This time's a little bit different from what we saw 2 or 3 years ago. I would say focusing on what would be your ideal set of target accounts and your ideal customer profiles. So going deep instead of going wide. Next, going into, if you are going to launch experiments, be very opportunistic about that looks like. So instead of a shotgun approach, really have a real database driven set of decisions on why you're extending into different adjacencies. And lastly, you'll notice this in probably your own pipelines today, but timing has become the number one reason why deals are getting pushed out. And so setting yourself up to be the first in line for when timing does go away, you are still providing value, even though the decisions aren't necessarily clear, leaves you in a much stronger position when we do experience, hopefully, a V-shaped recovery.
Yeah, that good. Yeah, those are like good key takeaways for our audience. Tisha, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I actually like Danielle's view of let's actually go back to basics. So understanding those leading and lagging indicators, not waiting for them to happen, but actually knowing what they are. So a company sort of creating their own economic indicator out of that, so that they can look at the macro economy and what its impact on their business would be far in advance. So what's that combination of metrics that they need to actually assess that? Because if it is actually true that there's a systematic risk of the economy actually will impact the growth or the decline of your company, then really knowing and proactively managing those relevant pieces is the best thing that you can do in order to be prepared, because we know that preparation will make sure that you can weather the storm.
Yeah, for sure. Preparation is key to every single challenge that we face, right? Bhushan, can I hear from you?
Sure. I think everyone touched upon some of these topics already, but I think to take the point from Jeff on being opportunistic with your experiments, obviously that needs to happen, but to be prepared to do so would require for you to go ahead and be replanning maybe on a quarterly basis. Looking back, how you need to go ahead and change maybe a hiring plan, because let's say when the downturn does move backwards, or if there is an uplift happening, you need to be in a position to capitalize on those as well. So you cannot just panic and completely shut off, let's say, hiring or other growth experiments. You need to be in a position to reevaluate and quickly go ahead and take charge and do those quick opportunist experiments as you can, to make sure you're able to balance the growth and the financial aspects coming up in the next year or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is like RevOps now need to take a step back, ground themselves, and look at the big picture, right? And a big part of this big picture, of the full picture, is the tech stack and all the things that you have to grow a company. How do you get more leverage and automation to have make things happen more like efficiently in a company? Because I think this is very much related to growth, right? Let me start with Danielle again.
Yeah, again, it goes back to reassessing, right, your current environment and just taking a look back. I mean, the reason you hear Jeff and I talk about go-to-market operations, and him and I have been on a few of these conversations, but it's not just what's going on with your sales ops metrics or your customer risk metrics or whatnot, but really taking understanding and step back to optimize across that buyer's journey. And all the different teams that are interacting in there. Do you have a lot of waste in that might be better to prioritize now because you're going to help give them time back to maybe there's additional value prop that you're having your customer success focus on, and they shouldn't be doing a bunch of manual work that they had been doing. So you could work with teams internally to prioritize that, or understand areas where you might have been building out some nice to haves, but can scale that back a little bit for other priorities that will make a bigger impact now, or give better insight to those teams now. Because the other thing we have to remember is just because we're in a recession doesn't mean our bandwidth has changed at all. So we also need to support all of this. And I wouldn't say necessarily additional work, because to Jeff's point, if you're just starting to do some of this stuff, you might be a little bit behind the curve. But it's really making sure that you're not taking on more than you can support, because you are going to have to back. We're the teams that are going to be pulled into those leadership conversations, right? On understanding something else. I honestly just asked someone else on my team was, should we be not just looking at our own trending, but the core ICP verticals, and understand where their revenues are trending right now and where they might be looking out for. We work with a lot of enterprise companies that you can get a lot of that data out there and understand, okay, where are we going to have to plan to support more? Because we'll have to reprioritize, right? We might need to support the rep selling into CPG over QSR, or we might need to actually replan and reforecast around those verticals because we know they're starting to dip. So I think, again, kind of freeing up your teams to be doing more of that value add customer care. And then also from a perspective of your own operational teams, understanding where the technology can help us. Because again, we're gonna hit those bandwidth constraints even if we're not already there. So,
one follow-up question related to this, that we are all already like in the bandwidth. We work very hard, and adding more work, it's not very sustainable. How do you make a case to like instead of shrinking your tech stack or your resources, how do you make a case for your company to expand, to say like, hey, we need more of this technology? How do you leverage those things?
I don't know if that was directly to me, but I definitely, I'm having those conversations, right? We're obviously, just like the companies we're talking to right now, looking at where we're spending, what's our hiring plans look like? Are they still need to have roles, or some of them growth roles that we were trying to, would be nice to have right now, but not. And one of those things that I've been chatting with is a couple different systems I'm looking at that actually would automate some pretty cumbersome manual processes and have a high return and give another inbound route potentially that we weren't having because it was a very complex manual process. So if a technology can solve for that, even if I'm in a, say, spending freeze, it's making that business case to our finance lead, having the right buying committee around me internally. So what are the stakeholders it's going to impact? How is it going to impact? Having your ROI data at hand. And just being confident there. But there's also the others, right? Every renewal that comes up right now, I'm scrutinizing, is this a nice to have or a need to have? I almost churned one system, and I had two other people say, hey, actually, this is where it's going to really impact my job. If we can keep it for at least one more year, we'll show you that impact. So like, those are the types of conversations happening. But yeah, I mean, I did see a question in the Q&A about what's a nice to have, right? I would say if you don't understand the if you don't understand the value you're getting back from a system, you have poor adoption. You ask 5 different people what the tool is for, and you get 5 different answers or none at all. That's a nice to have tool. You probably thought it was flashy. It was pretty. It did the coolest new automation. But at the end of the day, if people aren't using it and you're not seeing higher revenues or reduced costs from that, which really, again, back to basics of looking at why we do this stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's probably a
Yeah. Jeff, let me ask you the same question. Like, how do you get more leverage and automation to help make things more efficient in your company?
I'll say this, even in good times, so to speak, our role is still to get to do more with less. So automation, process development. What I think is happening, particularly for startups, and I work at a startup, you want to be very careful around your balance sheet, right? Companies are in a liquidity crunch. The years past, companies were raising money every 8 to 12 months. That's not happening today. And so you do have to present an excellent business that is going to meet all the metrics and all the criteria that your next funding round is going to look for. And I think you can get there by increasing the productivity and automation within the business. But automating everything isn't going to help you. And so I think there's a couple of areas where you should focus. Focus on the needs to haves, not the nice to haves. Eliminate redundancies where you can. Prior to this current cycle, I think buying was in vogue for almost all capabilities. I think some organizations may consider actually building. I'm normally against building and incurring technical debt, but maybe you do that and bridge and bootstrap your way for a couple of months. And so if you're building out new capabilities, instead of buying, you're paying down your technical debt, or at least incurring technical debt, knowing you're going to have to pay it back. That might be an area where you can at least set your business on a path to success for the interim period, particularly if you're a startup.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We got a question here from Chris related to what you said. What is an example where it may make sense to build versus buy and vice versa? Like, do you have any specific example? It doesn't need to be Jeff. It can be any of the panelists.
Lead to account matching, lead to lead, lead deduplication, parent-child hierarchies. There's a whole host of ideas, territories.
I mean, I think lead routing can be a big one. Those are a lot of organizations right now are going through some simplification of how they're going to be marking out their territories just to make sure the funnel for the different teams are full. Given that you don't know how quickly you will have to go make those tweaks again, it's better to have an internal mapping and live with it for a little while, which may be a little cumbersome, but it gives you the flexibility to go ahead and be very agile as you need to in the coming at least year or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tisha, I know you have a lot of experience working with data. So I want to ask kind of the same question, but with a little twist. Like, how can you leverage data better in an economic downturn? How this show up in your work?
Yeah, so I actually think data is the way out. And I don't just mean having it, because right now, today, one of the problems is that it's underanalyzed. So if we actually take the time to analyze the data, so let's take the planning process as an example. And one of the things that ought to be considered is your top of funnel. What do the leads actually look like? Not just numbers, right, in a bar chart or a graph, but the actual makeup of the lead. And then how can we actually increase our efficiency, right, in order to have extreme focus in the customer acquisition process? And then how do I actually use that data to identify what I do well as a company, right? And then build my funnel according to that. How can I decrease the risks and improve the probability of actually closing deals by truly understanding how I got there? And then at the same time, how do I know not to put all my eggs in the one sort of lead source bucket, right? How do I diversify how I use my dollars that are going to help me to acquire customers? I have to keep filtering that information until I can see clear trends. For example, I have to test scenarios. I have to track and monitor all of my assumptions. These are ways that I have to leverage both the technology, right, that in the processes, all the things that the the folks have talked about is leverage the technologies, make sure we've got the right ones, that we're producing the right amounts of and kinds of data out of the processes. And from there, I think that most companies will end up in a much better situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, like, the data helps you find new clients, but also it helps you expand your accounts already, right? And I know that Bhushan has a lot of experience with expanding existing accounts. Bhushan, what is the importance for RevOps to look at the existing accounts and expanding them?
Yeah, given the, let's say, shortfall of pipeline that a lot of organizations are going to see in the near future, it is important to basically have a clear hold of your existing customer base, figure out if there are more patterns you can see to identify opportunities, really dig deep and see if there's opportunities that can be uncovered to basically solve for existing use cases of customer, if there's abilities to go upsell. Even references, right, in the current scenarios can help out a lot. But all of that means that your team or your account management team has to have access to all this information. Again, this could become an area where you need to have access to that data. Could be an area where you want to maybe build something internally to provide that internal scoring of what is a good account to go after from an expansion perspective. Giving that bandwidth available to those teams to basically go and leverage the base to keep a target on the growth still happening while you still figure out some of the new business and new pipeline and new business acquisition, which may be a little more difficult in the current landscape.
Yeah, I agree. And it goes back to what Danielle just said, like nice to have versus have to have, right? And that leads to my next question to the panel. It's like, how can we help the teams to keep their product or business relevant when budgets are being condensed? Can I hear from Jeff? How do you make your product to be like relevant in this market when things are shrinking and people are shrinking their tech stack and all those things?
Yeah, I think Danielle mentioned this, and I mentioned this as well. In this market, you have to be a must-have and not a nice-to-have. It keeps you top of mind, particularly when companies are thinking about renewing, if you're in the SaaS space. So I think the first thing is to work with your customers to get the most from their solution. Like, why did they bring you on in the first place? Second, understanding what is the set of expectations that they signed up for when going through that initial sales cycle, and where are they along that journey, whether they're in year 1, year 2, or year 3 with your product, and are they getting the most of what they need? If they're not, then I think you have an enablement opportunity or an opportunity to invest the CS and the product teams. And so understanding where the customer is from, particularly those who are experiencing maybe some financial difficulties. I've seen some companies asking for extension of their term, or perhaps even extended of their payment terms. Some have even purchased ahead for licenses that they were expecting to grow into, but now those licenses are unused. So again, work with your customers, be highly empathetic, whatever that means for you. Find a definition that has a win-win outcome for you and your customers. Try to find from a product level what makes you incredibly sticky. If you are less sticky on the product's perspective, then really consider what it means to be at the messaging perspective and what you're doing to help your champions and end users look good internally within their own companies. I think those are some of the things that are going to help make or break their careers by investing their time in your solution.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tisha, you as like a CEO of a company, how are you helping your teams to keep your product like relevant in this scenario? What are some tactics that we can take?
Well, number one is making sure that customer discovery is the most important thing that we can do. So that's, if we go back to what Jeff just said, right, the relationships piece of that is ultimately important because, you know, recessions, for example, is so critical. Nurturing those relationships with the folks that we have is the thing that we need to do. In order to know how to do that, you need to constantly have discovery in place. The thing that I feel is that I could actually offer here is, in addition to what we do in our company, in my previous roles, one of the things that I thought helped was adding guardrails, right, that help the customer facing team. So while that feels like you're putting restrictions on them, it's just helping them to not make mistakes that can be costly down the line. What's an example of that? So if what you used to do is travel, which, to go and meet a customer, and we now have the opportunity to sit on Zoom more often. If you used to send them a bottle of wine, and we now can't do that, like, how do we put those guardrails in place up front, so that our sales or customer facing teams don't end up with any challenges? If it's now more than a QBR, it's monthly calls so that those touch points can increase in order to get that data. It's putting the processes in place that help them to understand how to do that discovery is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think this is a big part of your work, right, Bhushan? Like as a director of growth, looking at this, how to make yourself relevant and how to adapt your product and your messaging to this new economic landscape. What do you have to say about it? How to keep yourself relevant?
I think one in general is it is a good time to also look inward. There are companies, obviously, with most SaaS companies, there'll be some backlog of customer requests that are pending, which we can probably prioritize right now to make sure you catch up on those, make the product a little better so that you're ready to tackle on some of those new opportunities that come your way. And secondly, that can, again, help you reduce the churn. That is a common element for our subscription-based businesses today. And if you're going to save churn, that's pretty much as good as adding new revenue. And that's one way to basically still continue to go on that growth path while not expending large amounts on the marketing aspects or getting new tools or lead acquisition to work.
Mm-hmm. I have a question here in the Q&A that I think it's related to that, what you're saying. So Shivanesh is asking, what is the way forward in terms of revenue projections, specifically during recession times? Let me see who wants to answer that, who can jump in.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll follow up after.
Okay, so the way forward for projections is, so number one, prescriptive methodologies are going to be helpful here. So you can't, the one important thing is, I think I mentioned this earlier, is looking beyond the data that you have in the system today. I think it's really important for companies to look at the other macroeconomic factors and also benchmarking. There's a lot of things, a lot of data that's out in the marketplace that can help you to do a better job at projecting your own revenue. So looking at your specific industry details, looking at it over periods of time, thinking about the impact of recessions every 4 years, right? These are some things that can be found in data that exists outside of your own business. So I think that's critical. You can't project with just your own views and looking at your historicals.
Yeah, that makes sense. Danielle?
Yeah, I agree completely with that part. And that goes into like looking at, your ICP verticals. How are they performing right now? Or how have they been performing over the last 6 months? But also taking a look at your qualitative side, right? It's not everything, unfortunately for us, RevOps is data driven. There definitely is that art side of sales we have to remember. And that stretches across the revenue teams, right? Customer success is invaluable for what they can tell you about how risky something might actually look. We can come together with so many reforecasting numbers as a company based on all these data-driven quantitative metrics, but you get regular feedback sessions with those account managers and our CS teams, and it really does help you put in, which is not the most necessarily scientific, but a weight essentially as you're doing some of that reforecasting. So that's a bit of what we've done ourselves is we did a whole rep-led reforecasting, and then we did a finance and leadership reforecasting, and now we're meeting in the middle a little bit about that and adding verbatims around why we're approaching it higher or lower. So in making that visible, right? The other big thing I think, which can be scary, we have an awesome open culture at Zappy, but it's just being really transparent too. So not being afraid to say, hey, asking for help as a rep or as a sales leader and saying, hey, I need more data over here, or I'm starting to hear a lot of this chatter around our QSR customers, like be okay and be transparent about what's going on too. Get those if you don't have feedback loops open with your sales leaders and right down to your reps, put those in place. If you don't have customer business reviews for your customer success teams to get in front of those customers regularly, I have monthlies with a lot of the vendors I purchase from. Sometimes, you know, if we have nothing new to talk about, we cancel, but it's nice to know it's there. And make sure you're reevaluating what that agenda looks like. Have enablement or operations sit down with a head of customer success and say, important things we should be looking to talk about or gather, right? Here's some insight you guys could gather, and here's some approaches you could do it, and make it feel comfortable. So
I will say this, Bashan, was that your forecast getting cut in half? Like, what was that?
Yeah, I think someone just tested out one of the fire alarms. Apologies for the loud noise.
That was a chainsaw to your forecast there. I'll say this, a couple of tactical things. One, whatever your frequency of forecasting is, tighten it up, right? If you were doing a monthly forecast, get down to weekly. I will echo what Danielle's talking about here, pairing the data with anecdotes. So raise your hand if you have tons of pipeline that you can't possibly get to all of them. I guarantee you're not drowning in pipeline today. So the deals that you do have, they're super precious. Get into them, dig into the weeds, find out the why, ask why 5 times, why they're in the pipeline with you. You get an understanding of why they're really there. So you'll have your historical averages. You can use those on a probabilistic basis going forward, but that extrapolation is less likely to yield positive variance to what you actually want. So actually getting down to old school forensic forecasting, the pendulum has swung a little bit for us. And so I would shorten those timeframes, and I would add more anecdotes.
That's great. Tisha, do you have anything to add?
I did. I just wanted to follow because that one tactic popped into my mind, which is utilizing cohort analysis. And this, Danielle, made me think about this. I think when you put people into the buckets by which they start from and then analyze them over time, it gives you far more accuracy in what you can sort of project from them. So that is one tactic that I would offer in sort of keeping your projections accurate, because then you can exclude those outliers like COVID. Right? You can exclude when they're like specific time periods where they're outliers and find the truth. And then on the anecdotal stuff, one thing I would caution, while I agree with you guys that it's very important, this is why you have those meetings, I would just make sure that they're bucketized. So from a RevOps perspective, that you bucketize those anecdotes so that someone has the truth. Because we know that, you know, sales, the art can creep in, and unfortunately art is not science, but forecasting and projecting is. It's mathematically and it's mathematical, statistical, and you can add the heuristics, but even the heuristics have to have a place that's founded in the truth. So I just would say bucketize those anecdotes so that someone knows what they are. Someone knows how to qualify them, in the forecast. So that's
I would caveat that we're operating not necessarily in the normal distribution for every industry, but at the tails. And so the historical averages that you may be using might be highly skewed.
Yeah. So we have another question in here. It's about like how we can create this hybrid SDR and AE word, and how we can adapt to this hybrid new environment. And I'm gonna ask Danielle to give us some knowledge on this.
Yeah, so I'm probably given the theme of this panel. It's probably going to sound a little interesting where I'm coming from, because I'm talking about spending money actually. But we've had hybrid reps, so we started with super hybrid. Literally, they were new business and expansion, and just from that startup side of it, it was learning what types of team setup we might need. So it was all hands on deck. And then we were like, okay, now we need to split out a new business team and an account management team, because we were seeing our new logos dip and we were having great returning stickiness, but not a lot of new logos coming in. We introduced customer success. And what I will say is it really depends on the nature of what you're selling and the market you're selling to, with whether a hybrid new business really does work, or if you would need that SDR into AE feed. I say that because we've done 2 years of hybrid. And we're finally at a place where we've really solidified our sales profile for getting complex enterprise level logos over the threshold. But that's not the same sales profile that's going to want to go out and hunt and outbound and get some of the crappy leads from the top of funnel and whatnot. So there, as you grow, and it also depends again how complex your sale is, it will tell what profile is your SDR AE makeup. Because if you are selling a little bit smaller of an ACV or a little less, a more straightforward sale, hybrid actually, you can get someone that is coming in and can do both outbound and bringing in those new logos. So we're actually going to introduce an SDR team. I will say it won't be your classic SDR AE. We are going to be doing it in a really thoughtful, focused way. So I think Jeff was talking about, especially with how we can help more focus during a recession, is getting more account-based. I'm not going to go into ABM because that's a whole nother buzzy world to talk about. But, we're going to be having those SDRs that are focused on core ICP prospects and actually getting a warmed funnel to the new business rep so that they can get a better chance of closing, and that they're focused on the right qualitative questions versus trying to do all the discovery and initial, even should I talk to this person qualification or the spray and pray, which is totally dead. I think that's another hot take for another time. But moving away from your classic outbound, I guess, SDR and into a more collaborative focused SDR function is how we're trying to attempt that SDR AE transition.
So maybe I'll just echo one more point over that, right? So at my previous organization, I saw the transition where we were initially focused to be a very SMB org, again, low ACVs and so. And at that point, you could get away with the hybrid model where people are doing both of those activities and it works. But as we transition to look for, hey, as the product capabilities got built out and we were targeting mid-market or enterprise level customers, we saw that function didn't scale. It was more about a repetitive skill or so. And again, just being focused with the time available for your resources. The SDR function basically became essential. You had to have it to basically get the right productivity out of your marketing spends in general, to be able to capitalize on the leads you're getting, even though maybe even inbound. We routed some of those through those qualification metrics to make sure you're able to get the right ROI off of those and their conversion rates. Because if people are used to dealing with, let's say, a high velocity business, their skill set typically will develop in that format. They may not be equipped in a manner to quickly switch gears between dealing with a enterprise customer versus a low ACV SMB customer. Those are completely different sales experiences. So I think at that point, it becomes essential to have that kind of a model. I don't think you can do a hybrid to maybe start off that way, but I don't think that's something you can maybe succeed in if you don't have it set up.
I think the question around hybrid comes down to, why are we creating a hybrid role in the first place, when it has been shown mathematically that the labor and division, setting separate roles, has yielded higher results over the last couple of years. But I do see unique situations where there's a hybrid. One, when there's not necessarily a clear career path, and you are trying to sort of fudge your way into bringing a hybrid role. Second is when the tide washes out and you don't have all the headcount and resources that you were expecting, and you are in an unfortunate position of having to do more with less. We talked about this with the systems actually, and now you're just shifting the argument over to the largest expense of any organization, which is human capital. But if you just run the math, right? So is a hybrid model better than nothing? I would argue yes, because nothing is worse than something. But then the question is, if you are in a position where you can have dedicated AMs for existing customers, or dedicated inbound SDRs versus outbound or all-bound SDRs, just do the math, right? So you can start penciling out, what is the all-in costs of an SDR? How many opportunities do you expect them to create? And that should give you your marginal cost to generate an opportunity. And you start to ask, is that cost worth the price of not doing it, or the price of paying a specialist to go do so? And depending on how the math pencils out, you can start to make an argumentative case for for the hybrid or specializing. But if you're in a place where your beggars can't be choosers, you are in a hard spot, you have no career pathing, or you don't have enough headcount to specialize, then you have to settle for hybrid, and that's the environment you're operating in.
This is fantastic. I love all the data-based answers. Every single one of you had a great data-based answer. And I think it all boils down to ask the right questions, to identify, like, why are you doing this? That one was perfect. What are you selling? Because that does matter. Do you need really super experienced AEs because this thing is big, and then you have to sort of separate out? And then what's that handoff? Like, what's the importance of the handoff? Because in some cases that it's really important, and some cases not. So if you just have SDRs creating meetings, then it's really hard to think about putting an AE who also has to close deals in that combined scenario. So I think I just have to support everything that my fellow panelists had to say, because it was right on track and all data driven.
That's awesome. This is a great conversation. We love all the knowledge in here. And I'm going to move on to the takeaways. My last question for my panelists. If you can go like really fast, what are the 3 best tactics for RevOps to support an organization's growth during an economic downturn? And let me start with Jeff.
Let's start with pipeline. If you think you have enough, you don't. That's the first. Second is well-run operating cadences. You need to have these strong operating cadences to help quality check the performance of the organization, and go deep instead of going wide. Focus on what's going well.
Awesome. Tisha, what are the tactics that you would say our RevOps can use to face the economic downturn?
So planning, because I think the better prepared you are, the best you can be. The other thing is measuring the effectiveness, right, of your plan. So are you on or off track, and doing that frequently? We can't wait. Like the government on GDP can wait every 3 months to get that report. I don't think that companies can. So those are my good ones: planning, measuring, and then keeping your stakeholders aligned.
Awesome. Bhushan, what would be your takeaways?
I think the major one will be stay nimble, make scenarios. There are things going to change. Be ready to go ahead and change plans effectively with respect to even hiring or your growth expansions. That's one. Secondly, as Jeff, I think already mentioned, like dig deep, focus on your ICPs, dig down in your customer bases, find opportunities and reduce inefficiencies within the system. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think finally, maybe there's a little time to index more on human intelligence, specifically when doing pipeline or so, because I think historical trends may not show you the right path in the current landscape.
Awesome. What about you, Danielle? Your 3 best tactics to face an economic downturn?
As my dog just was at the door. Sorry about that. So yeah, I think we've all said it a bunch. Back to basics. It's been my theme. We have a new head of sales that came in 4 months ago, and it's something I've really been working on with him as well, which supports you having a really clear visual, uncomplicated insight into your pipeline, regular checks on your pipeline, try to figure out ways to reduce story time on that, but also ensure you have the context. So something we're massively rolling out right now is Medic, which sounds probably a little back to basics for anyone in this space. But it's really helped just like pull the reps out of their kind of rabbit holes of some of these pipeline conversations. Be like, oh, yeah, this is why I'm stuck. I'm only talking to this one person. I haven't even figured out who else needs to be involved to understand if they have that budget right now, or how we make the budget work with them. Or so yeah, back to basics with that. And then part of that is just going back to basics with your dashboards. There's so much technology and data out there for our space. And it honestly, it adds more complexity and clarity in a lot of areas, where getting back to some of your core KPIs, getting back to some of those leading indicator trending pieces, so that, to Jeff's point, if you're not already looking at that, you are behind on those. And not to scare anyone, there's time to set that up and get it in place. But I'd say it's an area to reprioritize right now if you're not focused on it. So that'd be the big takeaway there.
Awesome. This was amazing. A lot of content in here, a lot of knowledge for all of us. And if you enjoyed the content, I am dropping the link again for you to register for our summit coming up. And I am going to wrap things up right here because we are running out of time. But before we go, I would like to thank you so much, my panelists, for this amazing panel. I will have a lot to write down after this for the key takeaways for my follow-up email. Thank you for that. And thank you, the attendees, for coming and joining us today. We love having you here, and we love seeing the messages that you send in the chat and all the questions. And thank you, Everstage, for this amazing event. They're doing great things, so be sure to check them out. And thank you again, Tisha, Bushan, Danielle, and Jeff, for providing this great content. Once again, the recording and key takeaways will be available on our website right after we finish this, and I will also send a follow-up email to everyone with the link and the key takeaways. So stay safe. We will see you next time. The panelists and I will hang out backstage right now, but you enjoy the rest of your day, and make sure your RevOps are equipped to face this economic downturn coming our way. So thank you, panelists. Let's hang out backstage.